Good evening. I come back to my talks. Meanwhile, I see that some of you are seeing the talks critically, and I need to really appreciate some suggestions are coming which are very good. Including there was a request by Ketan Atul Bapat, about whom I had mentioned earlier, to speak more about the nature of linear transformation and link between linear transformation and matrices. And he was right. I was actually thinking of just telling it in this quite a hand waving way and go forward. But now I'll tell a bit more. I will give a detail, and I'm very happy and want to thank him for his, his gestures. It's very good because it's a reminder that teaching is never a one-way traffic. It's always a two-way traffic. Learning is in both ways. Learning is not in just one way. Of course, here I'm not giving a detailed course, though this can be actually converted into a detailed course on linear algebra. But as always, I start with my courses. I also want to talk about books which I have used, I have learned. From one of the books I wanted to show you but couldn't find with the day I was actually giving a talk on Cauchy-Schwarz inequality was this very fantastic book called the Cauchy-Schwarz Master Class. So here is Cauchy and here is Schwarz. French, German. Russians, of course, say that there was a mathematician called Bunyakovsky who did find out this thing independently, so they call it the Cauchy-Schwarz Bunyakovsky's inequality. This is a very beautiful book on inequalities. We mathematicians in our research, especially in applied research, in many cases we are just trying to figure out inequalities and we cannot prove them, so we try to figure out the literature if somebody else has proved them, if we can't prove them ourselves. So this book is a beautiful one, published by American Society, Mathematical Association of America, jointly with the Cambridge University Press, and its author is J. Michael Steele, who is a very famous applied statistician from the Wharton Business School in UPenn, University of Pennsylvania. So this is a book which would be our book for the day, and we start talking about linear operators. You might find that many of my talks are not perfect. It's not rehearsed. This is an open, impromptu talk. It's just straight from one mathematician to the others. Not to the others, to the students. I don't rehearse things. I don't rehearse a talk. I just deliver it to you. So there might be slightly slips, there might be certain gestures of putting my hand into my eyes or hair, etc. you might not like. But anyway, I am sure you'd forgive me and concentrate more on the material. So today we start with examples. We had said, okay, linear mappings between two from Rn to Rm, it looks like it's just a matrix. So what about infinite dimensional spaces? In infinite dimensional spaces, linear mappings are not matrices. So let us take two examples. So let us consider a set D, which is the set of all infinitely differentiable functions from R to R. For example, e to the power x is an infinitely differentiable function. You can continue differentiating. X square is an infinitely differentiable function. X cube is an infinitely differentiable function. Many such functions which are infinitely differentiable. Now, take all such functions. So D consists of the functions. Objects of D are the functions f, which are infinitely differentiable. They are not numbers, or they are not real numbers. They are functions. They are the operators which are the objects. So here is this abstract vector space. And then you define, so there are two examples here. Be careful. One is T from D to R. So it is how it is defined. T when it operates on f. F is that object in D, is a function from R to R, which is infinitely differentiable. It gives you f0. I leave it to you to prove that it is actually a linear operator. And second one, what it does is that it is an operator T which goes from D to D. It doesn't go from D to R, but it goes from D to D. So T of f actually carries you to T of f. From one element in D, it carries you to another element in D. So T, if f is element of D, T of f is element of D. And what is that? When it operates on x, it gives me that integral. So how does that f? So t of f is again a function which is infinitely differentiable, tf itself. So how does it act on elements of R? This is the way it acts on the elements of R. It is just the integral 0 to x fx dx. So you can now try out, those who want to write it, can now try out, those who want to write it can try out whether these things are really linear functions. You can check whether these are linear functions. A little homework, but little fun. But these are not matrices. You can't write them as matrices because the space itself is infinite dimensional. Now comes an important question. Okay, is that we are going to now talk about spanning and dimension again. We are going to talk about, now we are in an abstract space setting, abstract vector space. We are not going to talk about the basis of Rn or basis of Rm or all those things. Rn, Rm or the prototype we are done. Now we are in an abstract setting. In that abstract setting, what we are going to do today is that we are going to talk about the very definition of spanning sets and basis. So what is a spanning set? So spanning set is a collection of vectors in the vector space V such that any element can be expressed as a linear combination of those sets. And if these vectors W1 and W2, Wn which are in that spanning set is also linearly independent, then it is called a basis. Now if the vector space V has a finite spanning set, so whatever spanning sets can change, but the maximum number of elements you need in the spanning set, or rather not maximum, rather exact number of elements that you need in the spanning set to generate the whole space, if it is finite, then it is called a spanning set, right? So what we are more interested is that if we can always have a fixed finite set in which we can generate a spanning set, then we say that the dimension of the space is finite. And if the spanning set has all the elements of the spanning set are linearly independent, then we call it a basis, and the number of elements of the basis are exactly the dimension of the space. That is what is defined as the dimension of the abstract vector space. So you can have a look at it very carefully, very carefully. So B is called a basis if all these are linearly independent, and you see that then, and so basis is a spanning set with linearly independent object. So if the spanning set is finite, then the space is finite dimensional. But if you cannot find a finite spanning set, that is okay. You express one element with some finite number of elements. You express other element with some other finite number of vectors. So what is the meaning of finite spanning set? It means, so you fix up the number of vectors W1, W2, Wn. This is fixed. And any element in V can now be expressed as a linear combination of these vectors. Only the coefficients alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n will change. That is the key idea. But if you are in infinite dimensional space, not a finite dimensional space, which we call infinite dimensional, you do not have such a fixed spanning set. You can possibly represent one vector in terms of some finite number, linear combination of some finite number of vectors. Some other vector would be expressed in terms of some other finite. So you can never have a fixed finite number of set of vectors whose linear combination, all possible linear combination will generate the whole space. You can never find that. So for every vector V, the spanning vectors will change, and you can never find a fixed finite number of vectors which will span the whole space. If that is the situation, then the space is infinite dimensional. Or else, if you can find a fixed number of finite number of vectors which spans the whole space, it is called a finite dimensional space. Our interest, especially from the point of view of applications, from point of view of optimization and other things, maybe data science, we have to concentrate on finite dimensional spaces. So we will remain in this domain of finite dimensional spaces. So what does this linear independence, why we need this idea of linear independence in finite dimension. Why I need to talk about linear independence? If I don't talk about linear independence, what is the issue? Okay, I'm spanning the set, I'm generating the whole thing. So why I am bothered about spaces which why I need to have why I need to have linear independence of those vectors in the spanning set and call them a basis. The key idea is a linear independence allows you to make a unique representation for every element. So every element has a unique representation in terms of those spanning vectors. So U is equal to alpha 1 W1 plus alpha 2 W2 alpha and Wn. This alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n are unique. Actually what it does is this vector U in V, actually this in terms of this basis W1, W2, Wn actually corresponds to a vector alpha whose coordinates are alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n in Rn. So the basis actually links you up with Rn. It tells you that okay, if you are a finite dimensional abstract vector space, you are in reality somewhere linked to Rn, and that link is been given through these coefficients. So what it says that every vector V actually has a unique coefficient, a unique coordinate in Rn. These coefficients has to be unique. So they would represent a coordinate in Rn, and every vector V has to uniquely correspond to one coordinate. So that makes the representation nicer. So there is unique representation. So linear independence will lead to unique representation. Suppose not. Suppose you have linear independence and you do not have unique representation. That is, you have the same vector can be represented with respect to two different sets of coefficients. For example, here I have the vector V in the space capital V, where it is represented as alpha 1 W1 vector plus dot 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 alpha and Wn vector. This is one representation. Then another representation in terms of the same spanning vectors W1, W2, Wn, but with respect to different coefficients beta 1, beta 2, beta n. But then I can actually subtract these two. So v vector minus v vector will give me 0 vector. And so what I am having is alpha 1 minus beta 1 omega 1 vector dot 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 alpha n minus beta n omega n vector equal to 0. So but this omega 1, omega 2, omega n are linearly independent because that is the definition of a basis. Then what it means? Then it simply means that alpha 1 minus beta 1 equal to 0, alpha n minus beta n equal to 0, which means alpha I equal to beta I. So the representation is unique, and that's a key fact which has to be remembered. I have not got and defined, if you want to, I have not defined what is linear independence and linear dependence, etc., etc. Now, so you might think about that, okay, I've skipped this whole idea of linear dependence and linear independence in abstract vector space, but they are the same. You should be able to write down the definitions yourself when you are in abstract space. So for you, I just want to write this down. I just want to show you. So linear dependence means that the linear combination, if it results in 0, all the coefficients alpha 1 or 2 alpha n may not be 0, need not be 0. At least one of them is non-zero. Then we say that these vectors W1 to Wn are linearly dependent. If not, that is all of the alpha i's are 0, then we say that they are linearly independent. Okay, that's done. Now you might say, okay, if you have a spanning set and where all the elements that is represented through the spanning set has a unique representation, does it means linear independence? Does it mean that the spanning set is actually consisting of linearly independent vectors? The answer is yes. So this basis guarantees you a unique representation. Okay. So how do we do this? So unique representation implies linear independence. So 0 vector in terms of a basis W1, W2, Wn has, or a spanning set, because has a unique representation. But 0 can be also written as 0 wi as 0 into w1, 0 into w plus 0 into w2 plus dot 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 0 into wn. But we know that the representation is unique. So which means alpha I must be 0. Because the representation is unique, alpha I must be 0. Which means all of these vectors w1, w2, wn, they constitute what is called a linearly independent set of vectors. So here is a very important thing. So basis, this whole idea of linear independence is to link it with the uniqueness of representation. And this uniqueness of representation helps because that is what tells us what's happening. That will tell you that, okay, now let us see what is the basis useful for. See, ultimately there is a prototype. We started with a prototype called Rn, and everything that we are going to do in the finite dimensional setting has to match with the prototype. See, we have knowledge about the prototype. So on that basis, we are building up that abstract theory. So somehow we have to keep on going back and forth from the prototype. We can say, okay, we are really having a parallel theory. We are not that something, okay, something is happening in this finite dimensional space which will never happen in Rn. No, that's not the story. So that story I'm going to tell you that what is the basis for, what it is doing. The basis tells you that, hey, look, abstract vector space, all your elements can be mapped to Rn in a one-to-one fashion. That's what it tells you. So here is a vector space V. Suppose the field is R. You can take C also. So I'm just keeping it R because keeping R more applied thing. And suppose the dimension of V is n. So what the basis does is that it maps you to Rn. How it does? If you take a basis V, then any vector V can be expressed as alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n. Means to generate V, you take all possible sequences, all possible values of alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n. That is, you are varying this alpha 1 over whole of R, alpha 2 over whole of R, and alpha n over whole of R. So this vector alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n over whole of Rn, and you generate the space V. So any vector V is represented like this. These alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n are called coordinates. They are called coordinates of the vector V. But V is an abstract space. So what does it meaning of this coordinate? What does it mean? Actually, it means that if V is in the abstract space V and alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n are the coefficients with respect to which it gets a representation through these bases W1, W2, Wn, then with respect to the basis B, that is W1, W2, Wn, alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n, this forms a coordinate in Rn, and the vector V in the vector space capital V actually represents, actually can be mapped or actually can be matched with this vector alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n in Rn. So this is a very important thing. So this vector, this coordinate alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n, this vector in Rn is sometimes written as V hat. Actually, it should be written more in a square bracket B. This is a kind of symbol which is used by Lorenzo Sadun, who has a fantastic book on applied linear algebra, which I would suggest all of you to have a look. It's a book from the AMS. Indian edition is available. You can see the Indian edition written here. But please have a look at it. It's a beautiful book. And those who are seeing from other countries, AMS books are available everywhere. So this is a lovely, wonderful book. So I just borrowed his symbol with all due respect to him. So it's a nice way of telling. So this is a very nice idea that what is a vector V doing? It's telling you that C-man, the coefficients with which you are represented through the basis, that coefficients form a vector in Rn, and that is the vector in Rn to whom you are structurally similar to. That's the meaning. So that vector alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n is actually generated by the vector V using the basis B from the abstract vector space V. Okay, now let us see an example of this. And the example will come from matrices. Now we will consider the space of all 2 cross 2 matrices. A vector space, a space of all 2 cross 2 matrices. Now, here the matrices themselves are vectors. So their basis must contain of matrices. The basis of this space must contain of matrices. So what kind of space it is? What is the dimension? That will be a question. Now let us see how I can generate. Can I have a fixed spanning set of this? Suppose I take, now I'll tell you what the spanning set is. The spanning set will consist of the vectors 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0 means, these are the vectors where you keep one of the positions 1 and all matrices where one position is 1, all of them are 0. So you have taken a vector of 2 cross 2 vectors. Now what has happened is, what you have done is that, okay, you have chosen this set and you want to see whether it is a spanning set. I'll leave it to you to prove that they are linearly independent, and you can very easily prove it is linearly independent. Choose whether these are spanning set. So take a vector alpha, beta, gamma, delta in A. So you see, you can write this as alpha of this plus gamma of this plus beta of this one plus delta of this one, the last one. So this is indeed a spanning set. Linear independence, I leave it to you, you can prove it. So what is my, given the matrix A, which is now a vector in the vector space of vector space V, what is its corresponding element in Rn? It is alpha, gamma, beta, delta. Alpha, gamma, beta, delta. And you see, when you have the vec operation on the matrix, you get this alpha, beta, gamma, delta, that you stack up the first column and behind them the second column. And so this 2 cross 2 matrix, this space of 2 cross 2 matrix is actually a 4-dimensional space. It is structurally similar to R4. So here is that link. What the basis is giving you the link with the basis is telling you to which dimensional space, which n, which Rn, what is that n, that this space is structurally similar to. So 2 cross 2 space of 2 cross 2 matrix is similar to R4. Now there is this game of, suppose there are 2 bases I take in vector space V, in the abstract vector space V, I take two stuff. One is a basis given by the space B, which is say B1, B2, Bn. Another is a set of vectors D1, D2, Dn, which has also a basis. So it can have 2 bases, no problem, 2 infinite number of bases. So let V be that space, and this basis B is also taking you to Rn, and this basis D is also taking you to Rn. So V vector by the basis B has one representation in Rn, has one set of coordinates when the basis is B, but we will give you another different set of coordinates when the basis is D. Right? It's very natural because the basis has changed, so it is natural that the coordinates will change. Once you change the basis, because there is a unique representation, the alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n will change in general. So naturally, because if you take the 0, 1 and 1, 0 axis, there's E1 and E2 in R2, and you rotate it, obviously you have a new basis, and naturally what was 1, 1 in that space and what the 1, 1 in other space would change, right? You know how to do the calculation. You have learnt it in your higher secondary. Now, is there any relation between the vector in Rn that is corresponding to the vector V in terms of the basis B and the one which is corresponding to this vector V in terms of the basis D? So what is the relation? Actually, I'm sorry, there should be an arrow on the top of these V's. What is that relation? How we can obtain V of D from V of B? It turns out that V of D is some matrix multiplied with V of B. And what is that matrix? That matrix is, we will call ADB, that is, it takes you from B to D, is whose columns are formed of, you take the vector B1 of the vector B, and then you see you make a representation of this B1, because B1 is an element of the abstract vector space V. Then B1 has a representation, has a unique representation in terms of D1, D2, Dn, this basis. B2 has a unique representation in terms of the basis D. Bn also has a unique representation in terms of the basis D. So all of these vectors, these column consists of all the coefficients that are used to generate B1 in terms of D1, D2, Dn. So B2D represents the vector of all coefficients, all real numbers, alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha dash, whatever, some those n real numbers whose linear combination with D1, D2, Dn will give me B2, and so on. So this is a very important aspect. So this is what happens. You might say, how do you know? How do you know this happens? What is the proof? We'll prove in the next lecture. We'll prove, but keep a note of this. This is a very, very important. I do not know where I can share these slides. Otherwise, I'll share all these writings somewhere. So maybe in kind of a little website. I have no idea whether it is possible to do so. But here you see it's a beautiful result which says that going from one basis to another basis, one basis representation to another basis representation, the matrix multiplication is the key. What is matrix multiplication? Again, a linear combination. So everything is actually built on linear combination. That's the idea that I'm trying to put forward. Here we'll take a little bit more time. Now we are coming to linear mappings. Here is what Ketan was trying to tell me, that I should be slightly more detailed about it, and I'll be more detailed. So here is a diagram. I may cross 30 minutes today, so please forgive me. This is a very important, because I cannot leave this part while I've discussed this part. There's a diagram which I have taken from Sadhun. So no plagiarization. I've mentioned that I'm taking it from this book. This is a beautiful diagram actually. It tells you a lot of things. It tells you that, okay, take two vector spaces V and W. Meanwhile, you can ask me, oh gosh, I have forgotten one thing. What happens when I have a linear mapping from Rn to Rm? What kind of matrix is it represented by? It is represented by M cross N matrix. And I will take away the slide immediately. You can look at this slide for some time. You can obviously stop the run on the YouTube and see it. But it is represented by M cross N matrix. And why, you should be able to figure out. I think we have done enough things now so that you should be able to figure out why it is. Of course, you can talk to me. People have my emails and everything open, so you can talk to me. So, but you should be able to tell me why. Why, when I am having a linear map from Rn to Rm, the representation matrix that is representing that map under the chosen basis of Rn and Rm is a M cross N matrix, not a square matrix, right? Now, not an N cross M, but an M cross N matrix. Now I come to this Lorenzo Sadhun's diagram. It's a nice diagram. It says, okay, there are two spaces, abstract space, vector spaces, V and W. V has dimension N, while W has dimension M. And let us have a linear map which is going from L, linear map L, which carries an element in V to an element in W. So L is a mapping from V to W. Now V, so here is, if V, small v vector is the element of V, L of V is the element of W, right? Now this V, by using the basis B, suppose in vector V we use the basis B, in the vector space V we have the basis B, and that this basis, which contains some n element because it is dimension n, it corresponds to an n-dimensional vector in Rn. And this LV that you have, which is now in W, where L has carried the element V to an element LV in W, can be represented through the basis in W, right? has a representation in terms of the basis, which is say D as D1, D2, Dn. So it is represented by the basis in W, which is the m elements D1, D2, Dm, because the dimension is m. This is representation by this basis will give me an element in Rn. Right? How is this representation of this V in Rn and the representation of Lv in Rm related? And you will immediately understand that these would be related by a matrix by what we have just discussed, and hence this matrix would correspond to this linear map. Right? So here is what we are doing. So what is that matrix? How to compute this matrix ADB? So what you do? You do L of B1, because you have, when you what we do, if you write it something as V vector as say alpha 1 E1 alpha n En, or it could be alpha 1 B1 or alpha n Bn. So V vector is written as alpha 1 say W1 plus alpha 2 W2 dot alpha and Wn. W1 W2 Wn, these are n vectors in the basis. Now what happens is the following. Now what happens is that you operate the L on the V. So you get alpha 1 L of B1 alpha of L of W1 dot L of Wn. So how do I construct that A? A is constructed in this way. So if my basis B, in this case I have written B1, B2, Bn, and I have written the matrix D as D1, D2, Dm, then what I write? I can write V vector as some alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n, an alpha 1 B1 vector, alpha 2 B2 vector, alpha n Bn vector. Now I'll apply L on them. L of V is alpha 1 LB1, alpha of LB2, so and so. Now what I do, I find this LB1 vector, I find its representation in the basis D. I'll get a column of elements in Rm, and then I'll get another column of elements in Rm from LB2, and so up to LBn. So I'll have n columns, each column having m elements, because they are elements in Rm. So what do I get? I get an m cross n matrix. ADB is again an m cross n matrix. Right? So what is the relation between the vector in Rm that represents LV is ADB into the vector in Rn that represents the vector V. So LV of D is ADB of VB. This is a very, very important result. It tells you that when you go from one space to another, how your matrix depends on the basis, right? How it is dependent on the basis. So how do you construct that matrix depending on the basis? And this is a very, very important thing. This is the how you given two bases. So when you have say Rn to Rm even, when you have two bases, then you are basically constructing the matrix depending on the basis. So given two vector spaces V and W, you are constructing the matrix depending on the basis. So depending on the basis, you are constructing the matrix which actually represents the linear transformation. So L here, L here actually is represented by ADB. In this particular case, it is represented by ADB. Please note this diagram. This is very, very important, and I am holding it up for quite some time. Please note this diagram. This is very, very important. And then this result. Of course, we'll prove them. The proof is simple, very interesting actually. And that we'll do the next day. Tomorrow I will not have the linear algebra class. Tomorrow I am going to give an advanced optimization class, and I mentioned this separately, and this will talk about what is the meaning of descent in convex optimization, and that's what I'm going to talk about in the next class. But after that I'll go back to linear algebra again. So as I told you, every Friday it will be taken as an advanced optimization day. So every Friday I'll talk about advanced optimization. Meanwhile, one day in the week I'll speak about linear algebra. Right? Thank you and all the best. Have a good time, and do give me comments so that I also learn and improve my own understanding of the subjects, because there is nothing to unlearn, as Richard Feynman used to always say. Thank you very much.